The Oceanic Institute of Hawaii and its support activity, Sea Life Park, recently took a new approach to exploring animal learning. The study was an attempt to go beyond the kind of learning seen in the conditioning process. Using this process, a trainer can build a repertoire by selecting and shaping natural actions, putting them into a sequence, and teaching the animal to go through the sequence on command. To capture wanted behavior he sees presented, the trainer marks the action by voice or whistle and follows with a reinforcement, usually a food reward. Repetitions soon condition the animal to present the response on cue. Credit for the often impressive performance of a conditioned animal thus belongs largely to his trainer. To test the animal's own capacity, the Institute handed responsibility for initiative and originality to the animal himself. The study resulted from demonstrations of conditioning methods during shows at the park. In these demonstrations, random actions of a dolphin were selected and reinforced. The animal used was a female of the Stenobretonensis, a species believed to be exceptionally intelligent. During the first demonstrations, the dolphin offered behavior from her show repertoire. When the trainers later refused to reinforce these stock responses, she offered new behavior that the trainers had never seen. Soon she replaced old responses with new ones after one trial, evidently understanding that the criterion for reward was the presentation of new behavior. Sensing the research possibilities, the Oceanic Institute obtained the support of the Navy's Michelson Laboratories, a collaborator in other cetacean research programs. The new program was to be an experiment with a dolphin accustomed to conditioning, but not to being rewarded for sustained, spontaneous behavior. The objectives were to determine the speed and circumstances of the animal's learning that a reward could be earned by presenting new behavior not previously reinforced. Responding to this criterion would demand a higher order of learning, more nearly comparable to reasoning than the rote learning occurring in conditioning. The animal chosen for the experiment was another female steno, the only other of her species in captivity. This one, however, was unusually inactive and shy. During the experiment, the research team, linked by intercom, consisted usually of the trainer, an observer stationed above the surface, and another looking through the glass side of the tank. Their descriptions were recorded and later transcribed. At the end of the program, the tapes were played back against the transcripts, and the events were marked at quarter-minute intervals. From these transcripts, behavior graphs were made, plotting the number of repetitions of an action against time, and separating each type of action into its own curve. The experiment was conducted in the test animal's familiar environment, the show tank, although she was removed from the show during this period. In the first session, after entering the tank and being given no commands, the animal breached in random fashion. Breaching was reinforced. She continued breaching, pausing only for rewards. Toward the end of the session, she interspersed breaching with porpoising, another natural action. The first session lasted 9 minutes, although later sessions were to last up to a half hour. It included 27 breachings, which were reinforced actions, and 6 porpoisings, which were not. In session 2, the animal breached immediately, then porpoised. After porpoising was reinforced, she porpoised several times. In session 3, she opened with rapid porpoising, repeating the behavior that had last been reinforced. Failing to be rewarded, she showed impatience. Resuming her porpoising nevertheless, she porpoised 25 times in 12 minutes. Still without a reward, she hovered before the trainer. Suddenly, she presented a behavior called beaching, for which another dolphin had been rewarded during shows. When When beaching was reinforced, she beached 4 times, porpoising between, then 4 more times with no other behavior. The next 3 sessions were intended to be a photographic review of past performance. For consistency, only 1 behavior per session was to be reinforced. This reinforcing of past behaviors was an unavoidable departure from the plan. Its effect on subsequent sessions could not be predicted. In session 6, failing to be rewarded again for the action reinforced in the session before, the dolphin fell into a rigid pattern of circling, porpoising, and inverting. The inversion, which was new, was reinforced and developed into a continuous inverted swim. In the next session, the inverted swim was again reinforced for the camera. The animal's behavior at this point was unpromising. If not rewarded, she adopted a rigid circling pattern, which lasted for minutes without interruption. To break this deadlock, which threatened the experiment, the researchers decided to begin with her beaching behavior, and by the technique of successive approximations, that is, by reinforcing small movements in the right direction, lead her into new action. This section and the next were spent in shaping a tail walk. In following sessions, the trainer developed a second shaped behavior. Starting with momentary liftings of the animal's tail, the trainer shaped a tail wave. In session 12, she again offered the tail wave, and to encourage her, the trainer reinforced it. Toward the end of the session, the animal inverted twice in quick succession. This corkscrew motion was reinforced once by the trainer before ending the session. Although a weekend intervened, the dolphin began session 13 with the corkscrew, which was reinforced. By the end of the session, she had increased to 5 revolutions at a time. In session 14, to encourage more underwater activity, the trainer switched places with the tankside observer. Although rewarded for swimming near the bottom, the animal invariably returned for reward to the trainer's old position at the surface. While surfacing, she once offered a new twisting jump that the trainer could not capture from the tankside position. In session 15, after unusually eager activity in the holding tank, the animal opened with the recently reinforced corkscrews and swimming near the bottom. When neither behavior was reinforced, she reverted to her quandary state of circling and porpoising. Once, she slapped the surface on re-entry. When this new action was reinforced, she quickly dropped the jump and offered the slap. When session 16 began, after a 10-minute break, the dolphin became extremely active, twisting, jumping, and leaping in every position and direction. She was rewarded for a head-over-tail aerial flip, common in genus Stenella, but never seen before in the steno. The action was unfortunately not filmed. The flip was one of several new actions offered with great vigor and was the only one reinforced. This session, which lasted 25 minutes, differed from any previous session. In addition to 44 aerial flips, there were 19 breaches, 22 aerial spins, a new behavior, 18 corkscrews, 11 side swipes, another new behavior, 32 tail slaps, 16 tail waves, and 30 up slaps, also a new behavior. The previous maximum number of behavior types in one session was 5. In this, there were 8, 4 of which were new. The response rate had risen to 8.3 per minute from a previous average of 3.6 and would remain near this level for the remainder of the experiment. The unprecedented surplus of new behavior seemed to indicate a grasp of the criterion that only new behavior would be reinforced. In the next 10 sessions, responses not previously filmed were reinforced for the camera, but only one behavior type per session. During this period, the dolphin no longer rigidly circled and porpoised if not immediately rewarded, but continued to try different actions. Once a behavior was selected for reinforcement, she dropped all other actions except occasional slaps and other emotional signals. She began to demonstrate, therefore, response to a second criterion that reward would be offered for only one type of new behavior per session. The researchers continued the experiment in the hope of obtaining even more unusual activity. Session 29 began with a previously rewarded side swipe and a variety of other actions. Among these was a new inverted leap. After 4 reinforcements, the animal presented 24 consecutive leaps and extinguished other behavior. In session 30, she offered a mixture of old responses, including the inverted leap from the session before. After 10 minutes and 44 old responses, she subsided. Given 2 fish for encouragement, she repeated the same old behaviors. On the following day, in session 31, she again offered old responses. Getting no reward, she suddenly stood up and snapped her jaws. The trainer was too surprised to reward her. Then she presented a new backward flip, which was reinforced. She repeated the maneuver 14 times without other responses. Her quick extinction of unreinforced behavior again indicated her grasp of the criterion that only one behavior type per session would be reinforced. In session 32, she offered a new upside-down porpoise. When it was reinforced, she repeated it 10 times without offering other behavior. The session showed perfect performance. One new behavior offered from the beginning with no excess response. When, after a 10-minute break, session 33 began, she was unable to come up with a new behavior. After 19 minutes of unrewarded effort, including many repetitions of old responses, she suddenly rose again and snapped her jaws. When this time the action was captured, she repeated it with variation. The session ended in excited slapping. The animal had now produced a new behavior in 6 out of 7 consecutive sessions. She had succeeded in beginning some sessions with a new behavior and in eliminating all but the reinforced response. Although 3 more sessions were held for the camera, the establishment of a series of purposefully offered new responses was considered to be the conclusion of the experiment. Some useful observations have been made from the study. The test animal showed an increasing tendency to comply with 2 criteria. The first, established as requiring higher order learning, was the criterion of consistent inconsistency, that only new behavior would be reinforced. The second was the criterion that only one such behavior per session would be reinforced. The abrupt change in the animal's behavior pattern in session 16, during which he offered many new responses, suggests that the understanding of the first criterion came rather suddenly, while the second was learned gradually. The experiment indicated that the dolphin is capable of creative solutions to problems, solutions which are not based on conditioning experience. An interesting result is the apparent change in the test animal's attitude from relative passivity to vigorous participation. This change appears to be fundamental and has continued to affect the animal's behavior. The study, which could only scratch the surface of contextual learning, suggest several possible goals for future experiments. The enrollment of a dolphin's creative capacity in areas other than acrobatics. The training of other forms of life toward spontaneous rather than conditioned response. And the possibility of altering an animal's relationship with the trainer in the direction of participation rather than compliance. These possibilities await exploration.